Hey, welcome back to Silicon Heartland Sessions. Today, we're diving into the key insights from Cloud Nirvana's inaugural Cleveland conference. This event brought together industry leaders to explore the evolving role of AI and cloud technology across real estate, finance, and higher education. Whether you attended the conference or are tuning in for the first time, this conversation will bring you up to speed on the most compelling topics shaping enterprise technology. And today I'm honored to be joined by four outstanding leaders who were featured speakers at Cloud Nirvana Cleveland. Jim Gehring, who helped set the stage for the day's discussions.
Yes. Hi, Sean. Thank you very much.
Thanks for
Look
being
forward
here,
to
Jim.
this conversation.
Yeah, me too, man. Vijay Anand, VP of Artificial Intelligence at MRI Software, who is leading AI innovation in real estate. Vijay,
Yeah, looking forward to chatting with you on this topic.
thanks for being here. We've got Mick Miller, Senior Product Manager at KeyBank, who's scaling infrastructure as code for the financial sector. Mick?
Hey everyone, great to be back, and more important, great to continue the conversation. I felt like we, eh, you know, put a seed in the ground and then walked away. So let's. This is fantastic that we're going to continue to nurture, uh, or Jim would say, collaborate around innovation.
Heck yeah, heck yeah. Thank you, Mick, and welcome. And finally, we have Miro Humer, CIO at Case Western Reserve University, who is integrating AI into higher education. Miro,
Hey, Sean, glad to be here. Looking forward to continuing the conversation.
awesome, thanks, and thanks to all of you for being here and taking the time. I'm really been excited for this conversation. So, we'll start by having each speaker share key takeaways from their talk. And then we'll open up the conversation to get a mix of perspectives on these topics. I'm especially interested in where we might see debate and disagreement. So, since every industry is facing unique challenges with AI and cloud adoption, we're really going to try to draw some lines of demarcation. Because at the end of the day, we all are on very, very unique journeys, and that's where I think we find some real interesting nuggets that folks in the broader community can really take some wisdom away with them. So, so let's start by setting the stage. AI adoption in the enterprise isn't just about technology. It's about strategy, it's about leadership, customer experience, it's about risk. And each of you have taken a unique approach to this challenge. So we're going to explore those perspectives, starting with AI and real estate with Vijay. So Vijay, MRI Software is pioneering AI-driven real estate solutions. And at Cloud Nirvana, you walked us through the AI first approach that MRI is taking, including MRI contract intelligence and your suite of 15 AI powered products. Could you share some of the key takeaways from your presentation?
Yes, Sean. So let me go back and say MRI has always had an open and connected is one of our key strategies from day one to allow partners and collaborators to build with us. And we expanded that to include AI about 4 years ago, before the ChatGPT craze, I want to add. What that has done for us is given us the opportunity to start with some key products like contract intelligence, which is our flagship AI product, but um, intersperse AI into all of our products. We have over 180 products serving globally for real estate, and that's a staggering number. And I'm happy to report. I think we shared 15 at our conference. We are
Hmm.
at 25 today. So
Wow.
we have
Congratulations.
yes, we have 25 products and features that's in AI, and our goal most likely will be to double that number before the end of the year. So that growth trajectory with using AI is available. One other thing I want to mention is it's not all about generative AI. So we have always taken the approach that all facets of AI, whether they are enabled through generative AI or it is what you would call as your predictive intelligence or standard machine learning or computer vision or
Hmm.
natural language processing. We leverage all sorts of technologies in our products and tools to enable that. So that's one big takeaway, that we look broadly on all uses of AI and not restricted to generative AI and chat-like interface. The other fact that I shared at the conference that I want to kind of bring to the fore again is a responsible AI framework. So we established a responsible AI framework based on five, tenets of ethical or responsible framework that again all of the FANG companies have and adopt, about accountability, security, privacy, fairness and bias, inclusivity. All of these things continue to play a critical role in rolling out these AI solutions. And for a business that impacts lives where people live, work, and play, this is so important that we make sure that the AI technology that we build into our products doesn't hamper or cause harm or do something that's negatively impacting their lives. So those were the key takeaways from the summary, I would say, from the conference. I'm happy to go deeper into how we adopt each of these things as we talk further.
Well, hey, I'll say whatever you're doing is working because I just want to say congratulations on the continued success. You said a few things there that I find very, very intriguing, especially kind of with DeepSeek in the in the background, the context, and so forth. And this notion that AI models, which obviously up until now, large language models, generative AI models, have been largely proprietary, and now with DeepSeek, bringing kind of this open source model is kind of an interesting, a shift in the trajectory of the market. And I'm really interested, when you say things like open and connected, those are words that I think we're going to dive into, and the importance, obviously, of collaboration, the community, and so forth. But I think there's also some interesting points that can be made relative to the way in which innovation happens within the context of the companies that we work for. When I think about AI transforming lease management and property operations and so forth, I kind of turn my focus to the financial sector, and I'm wondering, Mick, KeyBank works with major real estate clients. Are you seeing similar AI-driven shifts in the financial side?
Yes and no. Uh, I would say that on the on the real estate side, I haven't seen a lot at KeyBank for a bunch of reasons. I would say that, well, number one, KeyBank is going to be 200 years old in April, so
Wow,
that's
congrats!
important, and
Yeah,
and a company like KeyBank does that by taking a very risk-oriented approach to everything. Uh, and that doesn't mean not doing things. It means taking a risk approach. And so Key's adoption of AI is very solution-oriented with specific problems we're trying to solve. And we're still in the investigation and adoption phase. We have armies of lawyers and armies of auditors and the government that we have to report to all the time, regulators are always keenly interested in exactly how we both implement and control new technology or any technology. And so our growth path is way more controlled. I would say the one area that we are doing machine learning and AI is around fraud detection. And that's obviously for a bank really huge. And uh, the bad guys are getting better and
hmm
faster and more tricky, and so we have to keep up with them. Another big area where we see significant amount of AI is at Akamai, our Akamai layer, where Akamai is a layer where pretty much all of our online stuff comes through, and there are millions upon millions upon millions of hack attempts every single day, maybe and maybe tens of thousands, if hundreds of thousands per hour. It is literally, if you imagine a medieval castle, uh, the hordes attacking our castle nonstop, and us
Wow.
being able to keep that out. We tried, if you've been in this industry for a while, whitelisting and all of that kind of stuff over time. But eventually, you can't keep up with it. AIs through Akamai is playing a huge part in protecting our stuff. And there's other companies doing that too, but we'll use Akamai in this
Yeah.
case. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the adoption is slow because for the reasons we all mentioned, we want to make sure we're doing the right stuff. We're not make sure we're inaccurately detecting fraud. We want to make sure that all of and also being able to support all that stuff. So there's relying on outside stuff. I would say everyone's super excited about it, and we have a lot of pilots going on. We've adopted just recently Copilot for a lot of our documentation stuff, and we use Office 365. So
Hmm.
that's a nice fit. We're also deeply involved. We use Google as our platform, so we're using Gemini, but in pilot form. So I would say, ask me in another 2 years.
Excellent, excellent. When it comes to kind of the dividing line between what AI does and what humans do, I think, there's a sweet spot there. When you're talking about things like security, I mean,
Mhm.
hackers don't sleep. Well, AI doesn't sleep either. And
Mhm.
so, building out a moat around your company with, AI intelligence built into it to have that 24/7 monitoring and
Mhm.
so forth is, an obvious area where AI can provide real value. But there is definitely a big debate about how AI is the dividing line between AI, where AI ends and humanity begins. And I
Mhm.
wonder, is just opening it up to everybody, is AI in our society becoming too intrusive? Like, how do we see the dividing line between where AI ends and the human touch begins?
You want me to go first here on
Go for
our
it,
real
VJ.
estate? I
Yeah.
mean, there is a direct impact, especially the lease review and extraction of data. These are 200-page leases, a typical one, and our typical client from the real estate have about 1,000 leases. So when there's an amendment or something that comes through, which can come anytime, in a month, we could have dozens of amendments, and a human has to go and look at 200 pages times, let's say they have to look at a dozen amendments. That's a lot of pages where they have to kind of go and cross check and verify and so on. So that mundane, boring, dull job that they don't want to do, and you also start looking at 5 leases and you're tired. This The quality of your review goes down significantly over time. So where I see AI helping the reviewer is that it speeds up that process and doesn't just finish the job for them. It gets them, hey, you're looking for changes from the amendment to the main lease, and here's the 10 things that we saw. And it kind of pops them up on a form, and then they go and just review those pages. So instead of reviewing 200 pages, now they're reviewing 5. And so they are a lot more efficient in doing that. So it eases the burden of the reviewers from these type of mundane tasks, where it cuts down the time. We always say there's always a human in the loop, because these are dates and dollars and financial information. You want 100% accuracy, and we never guarantee that, right? If you're using ChatGPT or Gemini, you always, or Copilot, you always see AI makes mistakes and can make big mistakes. And so that human review and human in the loop is so critical for many of the AI systems. So that's where I think it is going to be somewhat a process where you're relying on a tool to do some work for you. I always go back to the tractor and the plow. So this is the tractor for the farmer, and taking him away from the plow and heavy task that he does.
Right.
It seems to me we're still in the phase of determining how much to trust AI. I think it's, as Vijay said, it's very important to have a human in the room, in the loop of where we're using AI. But it's still somewhat early days. We're trying to determine how much do we trust it. As we use it in our, say, in the administration of the university, how much do we trust it? Where's that cutoff line? It gets us results. Are they accurate? How much do we want to use it? So I think we're still learning that. Where's that line? And so it's an interesting time. I think we're all learning. Everybody's in this learning at the same time about the same thing.
Yeah, Vijay, you had mentioned earlier about the variety of different AI technologies that you guys are bringing to bear within the real estate, market, and Miro, thinking about this idea of whether we can trust AI models and so forth. Generative AI, I would argue, is a whole different animal when it comes to whether we should trust AI versus things that we've been using for decades in the traditional artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, and so forth. So in particular on the generative AI front, Vijay, obviously AI governance, and we've been talking about human in the loop and so forth. And Vijay, you also mentioned the associate experience, and improving the associate experience is undoubtedly, there's a future for AI where AI is truly elevating the human experience. I'm curious, from a governance perspective, how does MRI, until we get there, how does MRI ensure AI models remain fair and unbiased in, like least decision making?
Yeah, I'll go back to the predictive intelligence, which is not generative AI. One of the things that companies have, and we also have, is we have a risk profile of of tenants, and what is their history of payment of rent, and their income stream, and so on. And when you have thousands of properties per client and hundreds of thousands of them, the best way is to use, again, essentially goes back to statistics and math, to look using these predictive models to say who is at risk and who is not at risk. And many times some of the data that we have, and again, we have been a Cleveland founded company of 54 years now. And when you have data from so many sources, many of the real estate data and income data and economic data is built on zip codes and people's demographics that may not be reflected in the models. Your homeowner of 50 years in a zip code who qualified and paid the rent is mostly a white male, and the model, if you're trained on that data, is going to exclude any kind of race or have an economic impact if they didn't make about a certain amount of dollars per month, that they may be at high risk or don't qualify. So we make sure that our distribution of the data is fair. It includes all of the data points of the current demographic of a population. And this is one example where we make sure that there is parity with the data that we have and what model we are building on top of. Same thing with facial recognition. We have facial recognition software where we verify, just like if you walk through a TSA nowadays, you're not, they're just scanning your ID and your face and making sure those two match. And we have had that in the real estate space when people are coming out to check properties for a few years. So that model has to have a broad set of faces so it matches up, and it doesn't do that. So that's where we look for breadth and distribution of data when we build those models, especially I want to say deterministic models or non-traditional or traditional machine learning models. It goes back to the data quality and the data
Hmm.
that we use.
Well, so Miro, you brought up the word trust, and Vijay, you're bringing up the concept of data quality, and I agree with you. I'm going to throw something out there, and you guys can tell me if you agree or disagree. I'm gonna argue that when it comes to computing systems, we're used to traditional systems where the output of systems is deterministic based on a certain set of depending on the inputs. You can always guarantee what the output is. With algorithms like machine learning, and now especially with generative AI, these algorithms are very, very non-deterministic. I would argue they can't be trusted. And even in the case where you've got good quality data coming into them, it's still not deterministic. Hallucinations are still a real thing. What do you think about that? And again, Miro, I know you were talking about human in the loop and so forth, but can AI systems be trusted?
Well, I think it's a scale. I think it's a question of how much can you trust it. I don't think you can trust it 100%. So it depends, as you said, data matters a lot, how it's trained. So what was the data used? How was it processed through the AI model. It determines what trust level you have with it. If you go out to ChatGPT and ask it a broad question where it has access to the whole internet, you can ask it the same question multiple times and get wildly different answers.
Right.
So data matters coming in, and we found that a narrower data set for our uses really improves the trust level that we can grant it. So it's, do you trust it 30%? Do you trust it 80%? I think the term matters how the model was trained and what data was put into it. So it's not a yes or no. It's not a binary decision. I think it's somewhere on the scale that you have to figure out.
I think, Sean, this is a really interesting historical perspective too that you should apply to this. And I've been in IT for 45 plus years, and I wrote down some of the things that people were paranoid about and didn't trust, and eventually became the fabric of what we do. And going back to when everybody had a mainframe, then this whole world called microcomputing, the first PCs came out. And in fact, at Cleveland State, I brought the first PC to Cleveland State, and they immediately returned it. We're not allowed to do that. That's
Oh,
illegal.
wow.
And people aren't allowed to have their own personal computers. And I'm just saying, there's the internet. Well, should we open our networks to the internet? That seems really unsafe. And hey, what about Microsoft? They didn't protect anything. So there was, each new transformative technology in our world brought risk and brought scariness. And I'm not sounding like I'm a naysayer, because I'm in technology and I love technology and I love new stuff, but it feels like historically there's been a period where we had to figure it out and figure out how to make it part of the fabric, so we don't talk about it anymore. In some ways, I hate talking about new tech, especially AI in this case, because it's in that initial relationship, how do we make it work? How do we trust it? How do we adopt it? How do we fit it into our world? But the client server, same thing. Object-oriented programming, same thing. APIs, should we publish our open APIs? Nobody liked that idea. Microservices, still there's a debate about whether they're safe or make sense, or they're performant. Cloud. Nobody trusts the cloud. KeyBank has finally passed the point where we've adopted cloud, but then first number of years we're not doing cloud. We can't trust that. So, and then AI. So I think there's additionally two things probably say about that, at least from my perspective and KeyBank's perspective. And I think MRI, I think Vijay, you would agree with this in a sense. Is I don't know about ChatGPT. I don't know, consuming huge amounts of public information. But in my world, say I want to apply machine models and then AI on top of that, chat API, I can control that in my environment, and I can trust that data because I know the data and I know the decisions it's making. And we can do little crazy dumb things like have our CIO ask a chat system in our cloud footprint, how many of the servers that we have are Google managed and which ones are not Google managed. And that's a really good chat question to our profile, but it required that I go through what I was talking about in my talk. It goes through making sure the data that you give it, quote unquote, the inventory of all the things and the metadata about that inventory is solid and consistent. And you can't do that through ClickOps or random, every team does it their own way. You have to have a consistent enterprise way to make sure that your inventory is and the metadata about that inventory is clear. Then you can do predictive things. You can start adding ML on top of that, looking for outliers. And we look for outliers all the time, every day, looking for, wait a second now, this team's logging has gone up, to $20,000 last week. Well, they turned debugging on, so we can do that. But that's not the end game. The end game is to really figure out how to get in front of it all, and then how to ask intelligence. So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is, this is a cycle. This is yet the same cycle we go through with any new tech. Is it bigger? I don't know. We'll leave that to the historians, because we're not talking about what's next, which nobody knows beyond AI. But there's going to be a next, and this is a cycle that tech goes through, and we're asking all the right questions, and eventually we won't be talking about AI anymore, because it'll
Right.
be so much a part of the fabric of compute. I don't know. I'm going to get off my soapbox.
I do love your
For a
story.
while there.
I do love your story about, bringing the first PC. I mean,
And
that's really interesting, and the fear associated with it. Not,
didn't even last a week.
but we're
Mick,
having, but
Mick, what year was that?
1982.
wow, man, that's really cool. But
That's
it's
funny. 1982 was when I was trying to get an XT to do a retail program for a family business. And we ran into, like, I can't remember whether it was a 1 megabyte file size limitation for holding data. And I called IBM and they said, we can fix it. Send it to Florida. I said, sure. When will I get it back? They said 6 months.
Yeah, right,
I'm
right.
sorry, that's not going to solve my problem.
It was an XT, by the way, that I brought over there.
Wow.
One thing that I see different about generative AI now is that everybody is aware of it and is playing with it. Even everybody in the country, all the consumers, everybody is
Mhm.
playing with it. I don't know of a technology in the past that's hit everybody at the same time and generated the amount of interest this has. That list you were going through, Mick, I remember all of those, but I know a lot of the people outside of the industry weren't aware of much of that.
Right.
Yeah. Well, computers, my personal computers is probably a big one. But you're right. I think the marketing around this and the impact around this is bigger than anything we've ever seen. And I think this opportunity to change things is also huge. I mean, I just saw an article the other day. They're thinking about using AI to determine whether there's a first down or not in
Mhm.
football. Because holy smokes.
Wow.
Well, but to Mike's point, the rate of adoption on the internet had a slant on a graph for the amount adopted like this. Smartphones were like this, and AI was like this. Like, it really has accelerated at a very, very
The
rapid pace.
the interesting thing is that I agree with you. The adoption rate of AI, from a personal use perspective, has been skyrocketing. I think that some industries are struggling to adopt AI into the enterprise. And I guess I'll bring it back to you, VJ, before we move on to our next topic. When it comes to the adoption of AI, what do you see as the barriers for the adoption of AI, especially generative AI, in real estate? And do you have any advice for accelerating that adoption?
Yeah, talk about some of the barriers. Even, I did a webinar, or I want to say a lunch and learn for our office, and we made it globally available through a webcast to say, hey, start using Chat GPT. Here are the guardrails that we have in place. Make sure you don't turn off training options available for uploading, and keep away from personally identifiable data, etc. And we put all those guardrails and told them, and nobody wanted to touch it. It's like, oh, I don't know, it's the newfangled thing. And last week we had our global sales kickoff meeting, and everybody in sales wants to use it, and like suddenly 400 people are like, I want the license. And actually this week we did decide to open up Copilot for all of the sales teams, and make interesting that as a Google platform shop, you have adopted M365 Microsoft Copilot. But again, it's the guardrails and the protection that it gave, that this is where transferring over from the consumer sector, that they are seeing the benefits, over to
Hmm.
the enterprise is happening, and we are enabling that with these guardrails to say, just look at your SharePoint data, just look at your siloed data, and don't give answers outside of that. So we are able to
Hmm.
put those kind of controls in place, so that um, I want to say the culture of AI adoption has shifted because of the consumerism of AI, and so in a way, it's a good thing. People are asking for it at work. Uh, One thing I still caution, or CIO or CISO is like, what kind of models and tools are being used. I'll bring up DeepSeek, and another one that's been actually more prevalent in the community for months has been Quen. It's from Alibaba, and they also open source their model, and Andrew Ng and others have been using it for a while in their group. Is another, almost close to a reasoning model, just like ChatGPT's O1 model. But there are several industries that have concerns about, is this a state-sponsored model that may have back doors in it that you're not aware of? Is your data that you send, if you are just using the tool, going somewhere, and it's going to hurt us as a nation in our security? Those are valid concerns, and essentially, actually, we as a company have turned off access to DeepSeek through the API mechanisms like on Monday, even though that was the most downloaded app on the App Store. So there's this, as Mick said, the risk. What is your level of tolerance for risk, and what is your level of tolerance for all kinds of it? It's financial, it's your IP. If you're putting your research data, what is it going to end up? So I don't know if I answered, like, the barriers and the adoption. I think we will see adoption because of the consumerism.
No,
That's going to be the guardrails we need to put in place.
I think that's very well said. There's something to be said for, if you want to go fast, to first of all go slow, and sail and chart your ship to smooth waters, because when you're moving smoothly, that's actually fast. And what you're saying is really resonating with me. To me, it's taking a risk-based approach, being very mindful about what technologies and tools you allow access to your enterprise, and putting strict guardrails around them. You also mentioned data governance, and I think you're very wise for focusing on those items to help steer the proverbial ship to smoother waters.
It's a great social experiment.
Yeah, this is very true, man.
That's worldwide. I mean,
Yeah,
I think because of the internet, because of social media, because of all of that, the and the connectivity of all of it, it's bigger than we've ever seen, and yeah. I mean, it has to be. It's a great experiment.
it's exciting times. Mick, does it
Yeah.
does it feel like 1982 when you're walking into the building with your first PC?
God, I hope not. No. I mean, and each one's unique. And there's always, I guess the other thing I would say, there's been a number of tech that has come out over years that, uh, and we're seeing them in real time, that never got to, I think what Miro says, that will we fully trust it, or between the 90 and 100%, that problem never happens for some tech. And we're thinking like OCR. That never, it was guaranteed to be perfect. It never actually happened.
Mhm.
Self-driving cars. Who knows? Right now, we're not seeing it. They're applying AI to it. They're doing all sorts of really interesting things, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah,
And I could mention 30, 40 other technologies that never got over that hump, but in some way we still use them. We accept that it's only ever going to be 80, 90%
yeah.
accurate. And for certain things, like making decisions about people's healthcare or flying airplanes, that 10% is intolerable, the risk problem.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the plethora of technologies and so forth, why don't we sort of shift our focus into infrastructure as code? So,
Mhm.
Mick, at Cloud Nirvana, you broke down how KeyBank is using
Mhm.
Terraform and Ansible to scale infrastructure as code. You also
Mhm.
shared insights into balancing things like compliance, security, and
Mhm.
automation in financial services. Could you walk us through some of the biggest challenges you tackled in your talk?
Sure. Standing up in front of somebody was probably the biggest. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, uh, yeah, I mean, I think with anything uh, that's you're trying to build that's big, you cannot focus in on what's in front of your nose. You have to have some ability to have a long-term perspective, multi-year, even though that's difficult in compute, but you have to do it anyways. Um, like the people use this term all the time. I don't think most people don't know what it means, the art of the possible. And we hear people talking about that, but it's actually a book that someone wrote, and it's actually a formula, and it's very formulaic.
Hmm.
And it's like my Bible, essentially. To create, the first thing you do is create a vision. So let's talk about that. And so what I think about the vision over 3-4 years for KeyBank and infrastructure as code is it started off just, first of all, my small team at KeyBank. I'm going to sound really horrible right now, but you weren't allowed. You're literally not allowed to be on my team if you weren't writing automation. That's just it. You can't be on my team.
Right.
And my team knew that, and it was a small, like 7 people, and we've grown to 10. We haven't really grown that much. I don't like big teams, by the way.
Well, and
And
you probably don't need big teams
no,
if you're automating.
not really. And so much so, and I'm not really going to do the main point, but so much so, my manager asked me, or actually all my peers on his directs, uh, give me a list of what you automated last year. And I was like, that's a bad question. Why don't you give me a list of things I didn't automate? And I gave it to him. It was 200 or 300 things just last year alone, because we automate everything. That's just what we live and breathe. But
Wow.
why do we automate everything? Why do we do that? And at scale, when you have tens of thousands of systems of all different types, and the problem is not setting things up. It's day two. It's all about day two, the day after you set it up. How do you maintain it? How do you keep it going? And more important for me is and I use the term inventory. It's probably a bad term, but how do you keep an inventory of all the things? Think about ServiceNow and that, and CMDBs and all of that. And that's essentially what they do. They keep track of things. But more important, it's not the thing itself. It's the metadata about the thing, the configuration data about that thing, and your ability to, because what happens all the time, it seems, is that you want to do something that touches all of them. And if you don't have automation for 20,000 systems, you're in trouble. You can't manually do that, and you can't control that. So inventory was really, really huge in our first 2 years, and making sure that the metadata or labels and tags on that data were crisp and clear and allowed us to slice and dice the data to get really solid inventories. And it seemed like, baby steps, so to speak, just to get that in there. But the only reason I did that, which was the longer term vision, was to get to a predictive modeling around the data, to be able to tell um, to tell things that you couldn't see before in our data centers, because, well, the financial model is completely different, right? I mean, you're constantly being charged for this stuff, and if you have a team that's now logging data into the Log Explorer, and now they went from nothing to 10 gigabytes in a week, that's going to cost $20,000. People leaving computers on. I talk about the Uber model. You take an Uber to your hotel when you're visiting a city, and you can take the Uber in the morning to go to your conference. You don't have you don't have Uber sitting outside your room all night,
Yep.
charging you while you're sitting there. That's no different than cloud computing with a VM instance. So we try to start thinking about that. And then finally, we will start applying AI models once our data is good and our machine models work, to start doing, really getting in front of problems, starting to predict the future with those, and also allowing our executives to ask questions about the data, the financial data, inventory data, and so on. So the long-term vision is, what I would call probably this optimization cycle, from trying to understand what so. Now that I've got what so, what can I do with that? And then now, what does the future look like? How can I optimize, and how can I really go to the next level? So that, sure, we use Terraform. It could have been 10 other things.
Right.
we use Terraform primarily because of state. It maintains state about a thing, so that when you say you want to increase memory, you just add new memory and press a button. It does it. It's a declarative language, and so there's all sorts of goodness about that. And but we also use other products. I mean, my team mostly uses Python for everything we do
Mm-hmm.
uh, on my analytics side. So we could use anything, but the idea is to get consistent data, consistent metadata about your inventory so that you can do really cool stuff in the future. So said differently, we have
Right.
really clean data that I don't think most organizations even have in their ITSMs.
Right. And
That's what I talk about.
and
And how we do that.
I guess
That's cool. Yeah.
I think you're very wise in in saying that, when it comes to things like automation, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Vijay, with, your approach to AI and so forth, taking a strategic view, taking a strategic approach. It's not necessarily about the tools. Obviously, some tools have advantages and things like that.
Right.
But tools change.
Yep.
Technology's changed, But the thing that should guide the decision making is what you're saying. In one word, in my opinion, is strategy. What happens on day 2?
Yep.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
So I am curious. So Vijay, at MRI Software, you're also deploying cloud automation at scale. Given kind of the backdrop that Mick just laid out, how does your approach to cloud infrastructure compare to KeyBank's?
I do not lead the cloud infrastructure group at MRI, but I can say as I work with my colleagues, especially with all of the AI services, we have, the exact same approach. And in fact, we use the exact set of tools as well
Okay.
to create those. And it becomes really important for us. I'll give you an example, even with AI services. For us, again, when we set up these services for access, we usually use it through Azure, and we have a pattern, and we have these services spun up in the US region. And we are a global company with clients globally, so they have GDPR restrictions, and our Australian clients have national data requirements. And when we signed up a client in December, they said we want this up and running in January in Australia. The only way that it is possible at scale is because you have these Terraform scripts that you can just run it, in a day. I mean, it probably takes more than a day, but just to get it up and running is so quick because you have already taken that infrastructure as code and said, sure, you want it in this region? Here, just run this script. We usually create 3 environments, dev, QA, prod, or sometimes 4, UAT. We just, it takes just clicking through and running the scripts in. Of course, the configuration and testing takes more time, but it's readily available where we are able to adapt to the speed to market with infrastructure as code. If we don't do that, we will be left behind. We can't hire 100 DevOps engineers. You can't hire one good one. It's a competitive market place, but that's where we adopt and use infrastructure as code, and some of these, I want to say, what is becoming as industry best practices in scaling for AI or non-AI stuff. Database, data warehouse, applications, scalability with Kubernetes. All of those are made possible because of Terraform, Helm scripts, whatever it is, the platform and tools of choice.
Right. When I think about, kind of coming over to you, Miro, in academia, we see a mix of legacy infrastructure and cutting edge tech. What's the biggest challenge that you face, that universities face in, automating your systems and ensuring security, et cetera? It's a very complex ecosystem.
Yeah, it is. Typically, for us, the biggest issue is change management and dealing with the people as we put major changes in place. But we've been cloud first quite a while now. Every application we implement is in the cloud. Very few are on-prem or require any kind of on-prem connection outside of research. Research may need some compute on site, so we have some of that. But security is a big concern for us. Higher ed is the number 2 target for cybersecurity attacks. So we've seen a huge increase in phishing attacks, all sorts of social engineering attacks tied to AI generation.
I
So
believe it.
you see all the scammers using AI just to do the things they do much faster and much greater volume.
Right.
So
Yeah, we keep on coming back to security, which is great. Uh, so Mick, so just bringing it back to you. When it comes to security, financial services obviously faces some of the strictest regulations. What's the one security principle that you believe every industry should adopt?
So I think it's important to distinguish the difference between security and compliance and auditing. I think they're very different things. When we have regulators come in and look at us, a SOC, a report, or just federal regulators, yes, they're sort of looking at security things, but they're completely different things in my world.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that there's one thing. I can tell you that from a direction and as a manager, we always say, "What's your number one priority?" and blah blah blah. My number 0 priority is security for all of my teams, and that's
There
a
you go.
fact. And it has to be. We always have to be thinking about that, and then detection is. But when I think about controls, uh, we have the cloud control framework. It's a thing, and initially I kind of thought that was someone else's job. So as it turns out, it's my job too. And how it's my job is now when I build a thing or release a thing, I have to think about providing evidence, because part of cloud control frameworks, or any kind of framework, is, yeah, there's a bunch of documentation. Are you doing all of this stuff? And then auditors come in and we just say, yeah, just trust me, I got all that. And that doesn't fly. So everything we build has to have some kind of additional work that we do to show, yeah, this cloud run job is running every day, and here's all the processes that are in place if it fails, and here's the failure defects. So I have a whole dashboard that's just for each and every item, our evidence dashboard,
Hmm.
that are now, rather than have a compliance person come in and ask me the question, and then every 6 months this actually happens, uh, then uh, then I don't have to restart. I just say, here's your dashboard. It tells you everything you need to know. So
Exactly.
I say the number one thing is to stay in front of it and don't let it get behind you, because the security thing is number 0 job. You drop everything and deal with it immediately until it's solved. And we've had a few of those incidents. But compliance is a different strategy, as you build compliance and evidence about that compliance in on your day-to-day work.
Right. It goes back to what you were saying about day two, you know? It- yeah. Yeah. What are you going to do when the auditors come knocking on your door, to ensure compliance? Very, very well said.
Yeah. The one thing I want to add, that's a bit of a non sequitur, is about automation. Is it makes me sick that we have automation
Hmm.
for infrastructure. Why? Because I think you're not adopting cloud if you have infrastructure.
Hmm.
I don't think I hate VMs. I think that they are a holdover from physical computers going to VMware, and so I think everything should be serverless. I really think that. You shouldn't think about compute anymore. That's the world I want to get to.
Yeah.
Yes, we're still going to have automation to deploy apps and to configure some of those things, but that I have to maintain servers, and in a highly regulated world, it means I got to be patching those servers every single month,
Yep.
right? And by regulation. So now I have a huge inventory of snowflakes, right? But when we go to a not thinking about servers, and you move away from that, and you start thinking about, cattle versus pets, you take that VM, if you require a VM, you just blow it away and put another one up. That's the strategy I think is right. And we have a lot of automation, I think, around building things, because we haven't really gotten there yet in terms of really adopting the cloud vision, and for
Hmm.
at least my vision, where you don't think about any of that anymore.
Right.
You think about the business value you're trying to provide to your customers, and you're deploying your solutions there without caring about the underlying compute, storage, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine kind of going back to the conversation earlier with Miro? We all work in enterprises that have legacy infrastructure and things like that. I would argue I'm with you. If I could wind the clock back and we had everything kind of a greenfield, serverless is the way to go. Have you read Serverless as a Game Changer by Joe Emerson? He's the CTO and the co-founder over at Branch Insurance. It's a great book. And he spoke at Cloud Nirvana, and his talk was about how why he'll never go hybrid again. And if you look at the infrastructure, the architecture, the enterprise architecture for branch insurance, it's exactly that. It's managed services, it's serverless, and and to your point, why spend any time automating things that aren't providing me direct value to the business?
Yeah, and in terms of cost management too, certain things we run about 50 jobs every single night, and we didn't initially do these with serverless, and it was costing somewhere around $2,000 a month to run. We switched to serverless, and this is not an exaggeration. It's 15 cents a month.
Yeah, I believe it.
So there's just financial value in not maintaining infrastructure, and I'm talking about all of them. The processes are in place that
Hmm.
have to happen, patching and all that kind of stuff. So
100%.
it is a game changer,
Yeah, it is.
and it changes. Again, I'm sick of computers. I used to fix them and put in place chips, and I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to focus on providing value, and I think that all of that infrastructure is overhead.
Yeah, I agree. And there's probably a lot of opportunity there for AI to even
100%.
take
Yeah,
a big role. And I
that's what
kind
we're hoping.
and I kind of wanted to come back to you, Miro, and maybe talk about Case Western Reserve University. You guys have taken a really ambitious step with AI.case.edu, which for those that are listening, if you're not familiar, it's basically a secure AI platform for students, for faculty, and for staff. And your talk at Cloud Nirvana highlighted how AI is shaping academic research. It's shaping data privacy, these learning tools, and so forth. Can you maybe walk us through some of the key themes from your session?
Sure, sure. So higher ed is a whole different animal. We have multiple communities here. We have the academic side. So what happens in the classroom? What's student experience, faculty experience, teaching? How does that look? How does research look? What do they need from the AI resources? And then the administration of the university. How can we use AI for basic efficiencies, the things that make the university more efficient, run better, easier, things like that. Remove some of the the boring tasks from the day-to-day jobs. So early on, we saw the need just to get exposure to our environment, to our people, have exposure to AI. Initially, I had faculty calling me and saying, block this. This chat GPT thing, we don't want it. Students are going to be cheating. Where today, those same faculty are saying, I want all the AI. I want everything.
Wow.
So it's been a change. It's been a big change that way. So early on, we had promptathons, we had AI symposiums, just to get exposure to what is this and how can it be used in our world. And we signed an MOU with Microsoft. We saw Microsoft had the largest on-ramp to AI, the largest available tool set that would work for us. So they brought in a lot of resources. We had a lot of exposure. We had promptathons, 2-day promptathons for faculty, and that generated a lot of ideas. But when we looked around at what they were providing, the Office 365 Copilot in our world was not the right pricing model. So we looked at usage-based resources, and that's where we developed the AI.case.edu with Microsoft and with a third-party vendor. So we developed this platform. It's really built on Azure AI, has access to all the models that are out there. Currently, that's running at about 1,800 models that are our community has access to. So that's a lot of models. They're all priced differently. Token usage, varies quite a bit. So we're moving slowly into that world because a big concern for us is what's the cost going to be? It's usage based. We don't know until people really get in there. So we've been moving slowly, and we're going to start a larger campaign to build more awareness and more usage of the site. So there'll be more training, just more PR type of activities around it. And I hope we're ready for what this is going to cost.
No, I hear you. I hear you. I mean, and kind of one of the threads that have been going through this entire conversation is, preparation. Kind of what Mick was talking about earlier about the art of the possible. And I'm curious. So, I have a feeling I know what the answer to this is, but I'm intrigued by your use of the word promptathon
Mhm.
for faculty.
Yeah.
What's a promptathon?
So kind of like a hackathon, but you spent some time just figuring out how to write prompts. So we had, for faculty specifically, we had a 2-day event, 90 faculty attended, and it was just to get hands-on experience. And we had Microsoft's Chief Innovation Officer on site leading these.
Wow.
So it was really interesting. And how do you write it? What are the particulars around the prompt, and how is it useful? And that generated some use cases. How can we use this? How can the faculty use it in the classroom? Where does it make sense? How can students use it to develop study guides? Can we use this to develop tutor bots? So it was a lot of that kind of discussion. So that's where we want to get to. We want faculty to be able to develop their own tutor bots based on their materials. That's only available to their students. We want to see how it can be used that way. How can faculty use it to manage their classes and everything? So
That's cool.
Yeah, it was eye-opening for a lot of people. It was a first exposure to the next step besides asking AI, hey, what's good on Netflix? You can use it in a more productive way.
Right.
That is so interesting. How how does this new check change the way we teach? Wow. Because I was talking about earlier and how to, from a risk place, how do you know that your students are actually learning? But it didn't really occurred to me. It's such a cool idea to say, how can you apply this to have a whole transformational learning experience? I don't know if you were saying that, but holy smokes, that's huge.
Well, and it feels to me that there's an intersection between what you're doing in higher ed and how that can translate into the enterprise as well. I'm curious, Mick, VJ, Jim, how do you think that your industries can benefit from some of the wisdom that Miro is sharing with us?
Yeah. I've shared before at Cloud Nirvana, and in fact, I had brought one of our interns to the Cloud Nirvana conference. So I believe the freshest minds, the innovative ideas are coming from students that are applying these without restraint, without preconceived ideas of what this can and cannot do. So one of the ways that we have always, at least the last 3 years that I've been at MRI, has been bringing in interns from the local universities to come in the summer and help us, apply some of these tech to problems that, maybe we have either become complacent or we are not thinking outside of the box in doing that. So that's one way that, we have interns even now working alongside our, not just software developers. They're working with our sales teams, with our marketing team, with our finance team to say, hey, yeah, you can do this task with a generative AI tool or other things that we have seen and we're playing around in the industry. So I'm always looking for ways to partner, collaborate, to Jim's words, with academia in adopting that, and also generating a pipeline of employees that we are able to hire and develop talent locally uh, in the Northeast Ohio region. So lots of room for collaboration. They also bring best practices. The restraints in enterprise is not as strict as what they have in academia, or they have different risk profiles than us. Um, and that also helps us to say, yeah, maybe we should be looking at this type of model in a constrained manner.
As we were rolling all this out here, one of the big considerations with faculty was how can they use this in their classes effectively.
Mm-hmm.
But it requires a lot of thought on the faculty side in how does this help the student, how does it help them learn. And currently we have about 100 classes that are actually using some level of AI in the classroom. And there was this one professor from our finance department, and he's been using it for over a year now. And one of his simple examples was he would give a financial problem to the student and say, okay, solve this within 3 prompts. And it got them thinking about how do you ask the question?
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it was, openly use it, but show me, how did you get to the answer?
So I'm going to ask the question that I think is kind of the elephant in the room. Does AI enhance learning, or does it risk making students too dependent on technology?
Well, it's a tool. It can be both. I think it depends how it's applied. What we've seen from as we talk to our students and faculty, students will typically use it to explain a concept they don't quite understand.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be some physics problem, and they'll ask an AI tool, okay, I'm having trouble with this. Explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old.
Right.
Explain it to me with a basketball analogy. Explain it to me, whatever, or create a 15-question quiz that will help me prepare for a test on this, or give me a study guide. So we see students using it in that way quite a bit, or using it to develop first draft when writing is involved. So there's going to be challenges in determining if the faculty says you can't use AI and somebody does, it's difficult to determine that somebody did, unless you see a dramatic change in their writing style.
Yeah, that's true. In all of this, we're talking about this against a backdrop where AI is moving so fast, and like the latest thing in the news with DeepSeek is kind of the latest evolution in this big AI revolution, which has just been so fascinating to watch. Miro, before we move on to the next topic, I'm curious, if universities don't embrace AI fast enough, what's the biggest risk that they face?
Well, I think the biggest risk is that our students won't be prepared for an AI world. And that's our focus, is to make sure that the students are prepared and that they know how to use these tools once they leave us. And just to make their careers better, they know how to grow, because I'm sure you've heard the comment that AI is not taking your job. The person who knows AI is taking your job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I
Very
think
well said.
the world we have to be ready for.
Right.
It's funny. I was recently at a conference with a bunch of business leaders, and the topic was AI in their world.
Mm-hmm.
And their comment was, we have to implement AI so the students come out of the universities want to work here. And our perspective is we have to prepare the students for the AI that's out there in the world already. So we're both trying to move faster.
This is very, very true. And like we said earlier, there's an intersection here. It's not just, our universities and educational institutions embracing AI so that we're helping the younger generations to leverage these tools responsibly. There's a role for us to play within the enterprise as well. Because, there's on-the-job training. Technology continues to evolve. We need to be able to advance the skills and so forth, and responsible usage, within the enterprise as well. Which kind of brings us to this concept of, we're all in this together. The word that comes to my mind is community, and so, maybe we'll broaden our lens and talk a bit about the community and collaboration and so forth. And Jim, you helped to set the stage for Cloud Nirvana Cleveland by, highlighting how Cleveland's tech community is evolving. You also touched on why collaboration across industries, what we're doing right now, is key to advancing AI and cloud adoption. Why do you see collaboration as so critical to Cleveland competing on a world stage?
Yeah, so for me, it has everything to do with what AI is offering us. I call it intelligence amplified. In other words, one of the things I love about it from a learning perspective is that I can pick a topic, I can speak to several different perspectives. Let's call it cognitive science, behavioral science, some of my hobbies, and ask it a question where I get multiple deeper perspectives that broaden my understanding. So, in the early stages, learning about something, asking it to explain it to me in Einstein's terms as a 5-year-old is fantastic. Once I get to know it and want to broaden what I understand about it, asking for different perspectives, I find to be extremely powerful. When you talk about collaboration and community, that's something I call collective intelligence or collective wisdom.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of times what organizations are missing, what communities are missing. And one of the reasons that I really push to bring Cloud Nirvana up here to Cleveland, because, and I'm not standing on the podium of advertising, it honestly is what I'm passionate about, which is that when you get people into a room having an open conversation about these types of things, everybody has an opportunity to learn and do exactly what I said from the different perspectives that we have in the room. But I also use it in community, and it's important to engage it. In other words, if I go into an organization and I'm working to understand what they're doing, I have one on one interviews with people from top to bottom, and then have collective interviews. And that builds up not just my understanding, but their own understanding, because in organizations, we work in silos. Artificial intelligence doesn't give a hoot about silos. It's got everything right there. It's one of the reasons we have to be careful about how it's used because of natural prejudice it might have built in based on what it's learned from our documents, etc. So to me, if you do it properly, in other words, Terraform and other things that help us with proper implementation and the
Hmm.
rules we put around the usage, if you engage collaboration with a growth mindset and allow for tough conversations, different perspectives, like just step into it, you know, you're going to learn so much, and you have the creativity of human beings involved then in something that takes that combination of collective intelligence and intelligence amplification of AI, et cetera, and build something really wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think we can use it for our community. I think we can use it for the whole state. We've got the Ohio Tech Corridor we talk about here, and I think it's wonderful. And to me, I'm, Northeast Ohio born and raised. I'm passionate about what we can do here in this area.
Excellent. And
Hey,
you,
Jim.
yeah, go
Jim,
ahead.
I have a question, and I'm going to use a story to demonstrate the question, and it's around thought leadership. And so when I was uh, changing careers back in the early '80s, late '70s, I eventually went to Cleveland State for a couple of years, and then I dropped out. I did a bunch of work, took my first computer science class. In the first day of the class, I think it was 1981 or '82, the professor was going to teach us Fortran on punch cards. And during the day, I was using compilers, like I was using C. And I went to the professor and said, wait, why are you teaching me punch cards on Fortran? And they said, oh, we're not going to have compilers for another 5 years. And so I went down to the registrar's office, and I never looked back and didn't go to college, and I dropped out. I think that was a failure of the education system and the cycle times for adoption. So while I'm all for community and I think it's a good thing, there's a role of thought leadership and adoption rates of new tech. What are your thoughts around how, like Miro brought up we're going to start teaching AI, but the problem is that the students and the teachers are now, like in my scenario, we were at the same level. We were learning the same things at the same times, and the universities they have to do coursework and they have to think about that. What are your thoughts around thought leadership and how that plays into the community model? Because I'm not saying it's a command control structure, but there's something about that I don't understand.
No, it's something that we face because we look at the challenge, in my humble opinion. Um, my wife says I don't have one of those, but it's that it's that you have to look at the bell curve of change. In other words, I did the same thing you did. In '82, I was doing C on Xenix with an
Yeah,
Informix database,
exactly.
and it was 6 years before I saw it in colleges, right?
Yeah.
But when you I go to cloud, I go to certain events because I'm going to see things and learn things, and you have the people in that room that are on that leading edge. In order to make that something powerful, you have to work on that 18%, 17 or 18% we need
Hmm.
to get things rolling to the 50%, et cetera.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So when you talk about change, exactly what you're talking about, thought leadership comes from a few people who are really the innovators, then those early stage adopters, et cetera. To me, that's where I focus. When I go into an organization to work with them, I'm looking, do we have enough people to step into the bell curve to reach that tipping point that we need to?
Yeah.
Because if we don't, I don't
Yeah.
bother. I got to pick my targets because I want to be successful and I want them to be successful.
Well,
Hmm.
and Mick, you brought up the term demonstrate. I really like that word, and the reason why I say that is because, and I agree, there are thought leaders in our community, and we want to amplify the voices of those thought leaders. But I think there's, by them demonstrating thought leadership, I think,
Yeah.
because in my I have a theory that thought leadership starts with somebody simply being curious, being willing to ask the questions. And when you have thought leaders in the community that are demonstrating that thought leadership and they're willing to ask questions and be curious and so forth, that then inspires others to ask questions and then also become thought leaders in their own right.
It's a rub. I mean, I don't know how you guys do it, Miro. Like how do you build a course where the coursework discipline is like mercury?
Those are great points you bring up, Mick. And I think we were both in the same Fortran class because I remember those.
But you continued on.
I struggled through that. Um, my son graduated from another university in 2019. They're still teaching COBOL as a required class.
Yeah.
What?
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's not disparage the mainframe programs. We still need good mainframe
we, we
programmers.
do.
Speaking of
We
legacy systems.
Um, but it is difficult. It is a challenge in higher ed to get the curriculum up to what's needed right now. So that's a thought we keep having in our mind. Like we have to get our curriculums up to speed to get students prepared.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and I do remember those same concerns I had at Cleveland State, where we're on punch cards. We're using kind of tech that was probably 15 years old at that time.
Hmm.
And it was just the pace of change in curriculum in universities was too slow. I think it's gotten better, but I think it's never going to be quite up to industry.
Wow.
So we're trying to get there, but I think it's a challenge.
Yeah.
That makes me really sad. In a good way, I guess. But I see the rub. I mean,
Yeah. Where
yeah,
we
I
do
see the
see
rub.
the immediate adoption of new technologies in research.
Yeah.
Mm.
So if
Well,
students
yeah.
work in the research realm, they get that exposure.
I want to
Well,
chime in at least what maybe it's a solution and also a plug for youth community organizations. And I'm involved with I mentioned it, a Cloud Nirvana organization called Civil Air Patrol. It's a U.S. Air Force auxiliary where I'm the local commander. I teach 28 kids every week on aerospace, STEM, cyber, and computer. And we have these are kids 12 to 18 years old, mostly middle school. And we did a chat gpt course for them a year ago. And these kids have a cyber patriot national competition. They finished 23rd in the state, in the country. um, just
congratulations.
last week. And these kids absorb things. So I think we should start at the K-12. Higher ed is too late. to where we are trying to teach them, AI, generative
Well
AI,
said.
and so on. That if we as thought leaders engage at a junior level, and this is what our competing countries, China and India, are doing. They are teaching them at the elementary and the middle school on using AI tech, and we are way behind.
Yep.
And that's probably where we need to start, where it becomes a tool. It's a tool uh,
Yep.
that they need to know.
That's so interesting. Again, another, I like stories. Um, I that it happens faster than you think. There was a time in Cleveland Heights, where I live, where the high school team in baseball just sucked. They were never even going to come close to winning. And there was a guy, a thought leader,
Mm-hmm.
who said, uh, well, we have to start baseball in elementary school and in middle school. And by the time they get to high school, they're going to be players. And so my son, Sal, was one of those kids that started playing baseball in middle school. And the truth is, they won the championship, not regional championship,
Mm-hmm.
the year that he was in his senior in high school.
There you go, man.
So, but the point is that it happens so much faster. I never thought about that and applying it to our world. I just thought it was just a sports thing, but it's not. It's Vijay. That's really inspiring. It really gives me a ton of thoughts about. You got to start early.
Yeah.
Yep. Well said. I love ending on an inspirational note. So thank you, Vijay. Thanks to everybody. Hey, I tell you what, this has just been an incredible discussion. We covered a heck of a lot. So thanks to all of you for sharing your insights and engaging in some great debate. Before we wrap up, really quickly, I'd love for each of you to share maybe just one final piece of advice. If a company or technologist is just beginning their journey into AI or cloud, what's the one thing that they need to get right from day one? And maybe I'll start with you, Vijay.
Yeah, I think Jim mentioned it, or somebody mentioned it, being curious and getting your hands dirty.
You
I mean,
stole his his line, man.
uh, I spend almost several hours in a week just keeping up with not the news, but actually downloading and playing with a model or testing it out and trying to build things, whether it's agentic AI or anything. I'm like, I need to do this hands on. So that's the
Yeah,
curiosity part. Whether I use it at work or not, I'm better informed on what I do. So
well
I
said.
think if anybody wants to get in the field or be there, they need to kind of do it and not just read about it.
Yeah. Well said, man. What about you, Mick?
So I agree with curiosity. I would say that the number one struggle I have with mentoring and coaching team members is is trying to get someone past the I should know this or I know this or the jumping to conclusions about things and that always goes wrong. So I'm like 70. I am not like I am 70 years old, and many people say, and how do you stay in the business? Because the truth is, almost all of my peers, my age group,
Mm-hmm.
have all retired, and it probably was a good thing. But more important, they mostly retired because they were still doing VB6 and they didn't want to do that anymore. And I think it's important to stay. I don't ever want to quit
Mm-hmm.
because it's constantly changing. I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly curious about the things. And I don't jump to conclusions about things. I think if you don't have curiosity, then you stop. You stop learning.
Well said, man.
So learning, I guess, is I'll add to that. Never stop learning.
All right, I have a feeling that Mick stole Miro's line.
Ah,
Miro, what?
Everything I was going to say, he said.
uh,
But curiosity is really what got us to where we are. People who
yeah.
wanted to learn what's this new thing? How can I use it? How can I use it safely? How can it work in our world? And getting in there and playing with it, getting your hands dirty, trying it, seeing what it is and what it isn't. I think that's the whole game, and figuring it out.
Well said. What about you, Jim?
Yeah, I think it gets pulled together when you take that and then engage it in a collaboration. And you have to have people that are in the five dysfunctions of teams willing to have tough conversations. We're not used to sitting in a meeting, if you think about it from a business perspective, and not focusing on one thing and everybody's attention being there and not being open and ideating on the fly,
Mm.
giving different competing perspectives and being willing to talk through them. This
Yeah.
was very peaceful here, but to
Mm.
me, getting down to the point that if we want to make big changes, let's start earlier.
Right.
That was golden in my book. I think that was very, very powerful because we're not just teaching them about the technologies that are coming, we're helping them understand how to think. And I'm not going to use something as boring as critical thinking, but we're also, doing it with the times and where things are, I believe, with the way VJ's, helping younger people. So I just love that it is about collaboration. It is about community. I'll do something really stupid here. We're better together, but I think there's ways to do that that isn't just a woo woo. There's an intentional way that we can engage with each other that makes a real difference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're right, Jim. Collaboration um, can help all of us. We can all discuss topics. We can all get different perspectives. I think that's really critical to growing the tech industry in this area and in all of Ohio. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I love ending on this note. Your authenticity is truly inspiring. And this conversation, the fact that we've had some meaningful conversation here, we've learned from each other, is in and of itself a demonstration of thought leadership. So thanks to all of you for that. And
Okay.
to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Silicon Heartland Sessions. If you enjoyed this discussion, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and check out our past episodes. And until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with AI and cloud. I'm Sean, and this has been Silicon Heartland Sessions. See y'all next time.